Ah, the American Revolution, a time to peak nationalism and fighting. But scratch that, cue the breaking glass. Let's skip forward a decade or so. Unlike then, the following years contained a broad land at a cheap price. This brought the attention of many to arrive with their own cultures, creations, and languages. With the arriving German, Irish, and other miscellaneous immigrants, so came the foreign capital to fuel the industry. Paintings came in forms of individualization and imagination, thanks to romanticism and hints of propaganda. However though, the art of landscaping was rather technology for tilling and harvesting, rather than beauty and symbolism. Literature, on the other hand, was varying from demeaning Catholics to promoting women's suffrage. I'm Jeane Erique, and today we're going to cover the short, yet steaming hot, and booming art, science, and literature between the period of 1790 and 1850. Starting off with art, there are a couple of things to cover: political art and romanticism art. This image was drawn in 2006 by Walt Handelsman. However, it accurately depicts what Washington did after the Whiskey Rebellion. This was a simple statement, which means Washington forced the whiskey producers to accept the taxes. But if we move to an actual 1830s political cartoon, the meaning behind changes. These types of political cartoons promoted equality for the poor in votes, economy, and working rights. Aside from influential art, however, there was the main art style of the period: romanticism. Although the main picture we think about during this time is George Washington, there were plenty of other amazing works as well. The Romanticism style was based around individualism and imagination, put more bluntly, to make things look good versus follow a strict and religious art regime. This lasted from 1790 up to the end of the 1840s. Although the setting and the beauty of the paintings would change, the symbolism of this art would stay the same, such as in these two images of a woman with a dog, one by Gainsborough DuPont in 1794, and the other by Christina Robertson in 1849. Although this art is amazing and has persevered even into today, the power of technology, specifically Louis Daguerreau's daguerreotype, a primitive camera, has made even more ventures for art. Advances in technology and science like this gave massive boosts in general public knowledge, which reinforced the Second Great Awakening's idea of having good, studied religion, as well as knowledgeable people. During the early 1790s, knowledge was based off of usefulness, meaning that exact sciences weren't as focused on, much like during the colonial days when survival versus Indians and the environment were valued. However, thanks to decreasing conflicts of post-1814, many advances in science, such as further understandings in mechanical energy and steam physics, would be applied to pre-existing technologies to further the industry. Some examples of which would be Eli Whitney's famed cotton gin, which separated seed from cotton incredibly quickly, though increased slave usage; McCormick's reaper, the equivalent of a horse-drawn lawnmower for crops, but took away the job of 6 men per reaper; and John Deere's metal plow, which cut through hard dirt easily and would later be developed into the job-stealing disc plow. On the other hand, after passing 1800, some more present-day things were invented. The first electric battery, you know, the thing your phone can't live without, was invented by Alessandro Volta, thus leading the way for Tesla and Edison a century later. Another famous invention was tinned food by N. Appert and P. Durand, which stretched the longevity of perishable food from 1 week to almost 1 year, which heavily aided in feeding troops during the Civil War. And the last and very important invention for all the AP Chem students out there is the almighty spectroscope by Joseph von Fraunhofer, which helped analyze chemicals in the 1800s. However, one of the hardest and strongest inventions was the cement to build the Erie Canal. This material was designed to harden in water, meaning that it was very ideal for making anything water-related. Also, the material didn't need to be pre-cut like limestone. Instead, a completely watertight and easily moldable material was used. So with technology and science speeding ahead of the people, it had to be recorded somewhere, such as paper books. As more and more developments were made through science, so too were developments in America's literature. In the 1790s, the most widely read piece was Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, but other than that, most works in America were pirated, which were then critiqued by the piratees and called garbage. The real peak of American literature came from 1830 to 1850. Pieces from this period ranged widely due to the newly arrived Roman Catholic immigrants and the then resentful and belligerent American inhabitants. Of the first of these well-known books, there is Maria Monk's Awful Disclosures, which heavily battered all Roman Catholics with stories of their sins, from lying at confession to calling them flat-out insane. A short while later, though, women writers like Maria would be writing for suffrage. A great example of this would be Louisa Alcott's Little Women, which empowered others through the story of her life from childhood to adult. However, after a decade or so, the miners gained some power, and thus writers began to have other ideas not focused on the newly arrived. One of the most famous works of the late 1840s was the poem Evangeline by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, in which an Acadian named Evangeline searches for her lost love, Gabrielle. Stories like this proved to the world that America did have some form of decent writers, even if originally foreign. Another famous work at the time was U.S.A. by William Gilmore Simms, which told of the fictional tale during the U.S.A. War and how the Americans allied with the U.S.A. Indians and fought for land. This would turn out to be his most popular and nationalistic book. And the third renowned title, called The Scarlet Letter, by Nathaniel Hawthorne, told of past adulteresses being forced to wear a red A on their clothing, which gave this author their present-day status. With all these tales going around, it's no wonder how America came to be so diverse in terms of art, science, and literature. And so this period of time spanning about 60 years was full of many advances. Without a majority of these creations, there may not have been any present-day items of America today. But what do you think? Even without these advances, would America have been the same? Our country is known to be diverse, but the diversity came from other places. So I leave it to you to decide for yourself what America would have been like without the art, science, and literature that was so greatly made.